The Monkey Mind Podcast, your number one platform for athletes and mental health. Hosted by Danny Perez and Anthony Florentino.
This is episode 69 featuring Shannon Murray. Shannon is a clinical therapist and former Division I swimmer at the University of Maine. But before we get to today's episode, we have a quick word from our sponsor. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Daily Dose CBD Inc. Daily Dose CBD Inc. creates full-spectrum CBD products ranging from tinctures, balms, and dog treats. Research has shown that CBD has successful results in aiding in the following areas: anti-inflammation, anxiety, PTSD, help with breaking addiction, neuroprotection, epilepsy, arthritis, chronic pain, and sleeping disorders. Daily Dose makes an extremely safe and effective product that we know you will love, enjoy, and benefit from. Daily Dose has given Monkey Mind listeners 15% off all their orders. Head over to dailydosecbdinc.com and use promo code MonkeyMind15 for 15% off your purchases. That's promo code MonkeyMind15 for 15% off all your orders at dailydosecbdinc.com. Perfect. Okay, so we have Shannon Murray on today. She's a former Division I swimmer at the University of Maine. Welcome on.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Just to give context, she married our old strength and conditioning coach at the University of Maine, Matt Murray, who's now UMass Lowell Riverhawks strength and conditioning coach with their hockey team. So that's how I met her. And we've spoken about mental health in a couple different occasions, and you're working in that field. So if you could just please introduce yourself to everybody, who you are, what you do, and kind of just your background in sports.
Sounds good. So I'm Shannon. I'm a clinical therapist working at a mental health hospital technically located in Bangor, Maine, but I work from home full time for the past, a year and a half. So doing all telehealth therapy with adolescents to young adults and even older adults. So quite a range. And so just basically doing some group therapy as well, and working with a clinician and psychiatrist and a registered dietitian.
Yeah, so talk about your athletic background as well, because obviously you were a swimmer at University of Maine, but also hold a lot of records there as well. So you can boast about yourself for that too as well. So don't be shy.
Oh, thanks. So I've been swimming, since I was like 6 years old. I did club swimming pretty competitively for most of my career. Wasn't much into high school swimming. It wasn't big in my town, but I swam. Got to give a shout out to Bluefish Swim Club and Magnus, which is now Crimson Aquatics in Massachusetts. So that was the bulk of my career. Mental health wise, didn't really have any issues in high school until I got to college, which is where I swam Division I for all 4 years. I don't even know how many records are still standing at this point, but I swam distance freestyle, individual medley, dabbled in some backstroke. So kind of all over the place. But I would say, I don't know, probably in high school, just was an anxious person. And then college is kind of where things started to get more competitive for me, I guess. Kind of a bigger fish in a smaller pond, if you would say, but yeah.
So you said the anxiety was always kind of there, but then it really, I guess, I wouldn't say got it. I mean, maybe it did, but kind of just elevate or got out of hand in college just because of the environment and obviously playing at a Division I level?
Yeah. So always an anxious person. Like, I'm that girl that like, you can talk to me and I will turn like 5 shades of red. It happens without even me feeling anxious sometimes. Like, it's just my automatic like body's response. Mm-hmm. And then, so always kind of an anxious person, you always use sports as an outlet to kind of deal with that anxiety outside of the pool. So that was huge for me in high school, coming from a single family home. That was a big stressor, just those dynamics. And then having that place to go was like key, and just kind of like leave it at practice or like whatever swim meet was happening that weekend was really important. And then I would say probably in college, I had a rough freshman year. Didn't perform how I wanted to, just probably because it was new, but I put so much pressure on myself. And I would say like after that year, I like kind of locked it down. So I think kind of through senior year is when I started to have like a more unhealthy relationship with exercise, kind of more of like an obsessive component to it. So that's kind of how it started for me.
Yeah. What was your experience like in regards to that? If you care to talk about it, in specifics, like I think a lot of people, it's kind of a new thing. There's people that go through it, and I think a lot of people maybe don't recognize they're kind of going through that. But I guess as an athlete, you're naturally prone to just training all the time. But how for you was it in the excessive range, would you say?
Yeah. So I think you hit on the nail. In a way, like, I feel like, for example, I didn't know it was going on until I look back on those years where I was like, oh my God, like that was happening. For example, like we would do a 2-hour practice in the pool, and then I would feel the need to like go and run it out and go to the rec center and get an extra workout in because I felt that wasn't enough. It's kind of just like going above and beyond. And it tied into, my diet too, my nutrition. I would feel really, I would put a lot of pressure on myself around like my nutrition and get a lot of like food guilt if I was eating outside of like what was, considered good for my body. Had a lot of good foods versus bad foods. And then I would kind of compensate for that with exercise. So
Okay.
that's kind of where things got excessive. And like I said, I didn't know what was going on, probably until after the fact, looking back and reflecting on those instances.
Yeah. Was it almost like kind of getting to a degree of runner's high of just when you're working out and it's like a sense of that rush that you get from doing it and you just kind of keep chasing that, or was it just always like that, more so the sense of guilt that you had if you didn't feel like you, I don't know, got enough out of the day, or was it a little bit of both?
I would say it's twofold for sure. Absolutely. In the sense of like, I mean, I loved working out. I love that feeling. I love that feeling of accomplishment, hitting a goal, getting a PR or, a personal best, whatever that was, in the water or outside of the water. If I was going for a run and like was getting, my best mile times, there is that like reinforcement there. And I think that that's where things kind of get sticky, is because there's character traits and attributes that really are positive for athletes, whether that's perseverance or determination, kind of working through adversity. Those are things that make really good athletes. So I don't know. Sorry, you
There
can see
it is.
behind me. Yeah. So I think that's one component. But the other side being the guilty part. Like if I felt like I partied too hard that weekend, or, my nutrition was off, like I said, I mean, it's real talk. Like I just felt bad about it, that I was ready to go that next Monday. And sometimes I wouldn't even wait till that Monday practice. I would just go for it that evening or like that next morning when I woke up, regardless of how I was feeling or what my body was telling me.
Yeah, I think like you said, that these are all good attributes to have. And it's hard for me to say, oh, like it's important to find that balance, because it is. But at the end of the day, the elite athletes who achieve the things that they do, you have to go all in a sense, and you have to almost be obsessed with it. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
be obsessed with it and do everything you got to do, but also make sure it's not detrimental to your health, both physically and mentally. So it's like finding the sweet spot where you're giving everything you can to the point where it's not actually, regressing your progress.
Yeah, it's totally a fine line. And I've seen it a lot in my work. It's just having that, almost like that work-life balance. It's like sports life balance,
Mm-hmm.
not letting that trickle into other aspects of your life. And really keeping those things separate and trusting the process. I think that's huge.
Yeah, no, definitely. Also, one thing we talked about, which I'm sure you could agree with, is focusing on the process more so than the goal. So a big thing that that I've learned recently is just you have your goal, write it down, but then forget about it almost and just kind of focus on the things you need to do to achieve that and just kind of
Yeah.
get lost in the process of the little things, just, I don't know, the whole journey as opposed to just like the end goal, because that can be detrimental as well.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I've learned for sure is just being able to trust your body and really be self-aware of what that feedback your body is giving you. Um, I think, there's so much technology out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm married to a sports guy, like he loves his sports technology. I think it's a great tool to have, but the best tool is yourself. If, what numbers can tell a coach is totally different than what you can
Mm-hmm.
tell a coach, based on what you're feeling, what your stress is, what your sleep's like, um, just what's going on with you personally.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to advocate for yourself. And I think, some people see that as a sign of weakness,
Mm-hmm.
like to see like, oh, they, I don't know, like they were up studying I'm thinking of like college, like they
Yep.
were up all studying all night, so they didn't get much sleep. And so they feel like crap the next day. And yet they're either going to overwork themselves or, just grind through it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big piece of it too.
No, I definitely agree. In regards to your work, like you mentioned before, I want to segue into that. If you can just kind of, I know you mentioned it in the beginning, but we're a few minutes into the episode, so if you can kind of remind everybody what you do again, and just kind of dive into the work that you've been doing for the last 7 years now, correct?
Yeah, so I'm an eating disorder therapist now. So kind of a specialty that I've really found my niche in. Didn't always do eating disorders. I originally started out in early childhood, working with little ones, then went to school-based in elementary school. Um, then went to the hospital setting doing evals, and then I found myself here, really found my passion working with a range of eating disorders, and like I said, all age ranges on an outpatient basis.
Okay. Talk about eating disorders. You're the first person to ever speak on this as a professional in the field. So educate those who don't know, kind of just what goes on in your world and what exactly it is in the most basic form.
Okay, simplify it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Digestible. Make it digestible.
All right. So basically, I would say there are four main eating disorders that I see. Those include anorexia, ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, binge eating disorder. Oh, what's the fourth one? I'll leave it at that. I might have to come back to that one.
Mm-hmm.
So at least those three are the main ones that I see. And so basically with people getting referred, you can self-refer. And we kind of do an eval. We talk about, what's going on, what made you come see us. And typically it's their, nutrition taking over their lives. It's really impeding on their function. What separates those three that I just mentioned, anorexia is really that drive for thinness, and that fear of weight gain. We see that a lot of times in stereotypically like runners or dancers, gymnasts, based on that certain body type. But that doesn't mean, someone in higher weight range wouldn't meet criteria for that. The difference between anorexia and ARFID is that ARFID, the avoidant restrictive food intake, is that there's no drive for thinness. They don't have a fear of weight gain, but maybe they're just under eating and are experiencing malnutrition. So that's the main two. And then binge eating is eating in a large amount in a short period of time, with loss of control. And yeah, so those are the three main ones that I see.
Yeah. One thing you noticed, or that you mentioned before we were on the episode here, is that there's been a rise in obsessive exercise and restrictive eating since the coronavirus pandemic. And it's always been prevalent, but underreported. So if you could just talk about that, and if you have any, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, but if you do have any statistics, kind of like what they are, and kind of the main things that you've been seeing since the coronavirus pandemic, and why that's been the case.
Yeah. So actually, and I just remembered the fourth eating disorder that I see, which is completely the most popular with athletes, as well as bulimia nervosa. That is an eating disorder where there's a compensatory behavior associated with the eating behavior. That could include compulsive exercise, feeling the need to burn off calories. It could be purging, or using laxatives or diuretics. So I just wanted to make that as a side note.
Thank you. Yep.
But with the pandemic, a rise in the sense of people felt a loss of control in their lives. A lot of people look to food for a sense of control, in my experience, and some patients, that I've worked with, is, they are just looking for a way to cope with the pandemic and feel like, they're not going to get fat. So they're going to turn to food because maybe their sports have been canceled, or they can't go to their local gym. So I've really seen that. I've really seen that in adolescents, but as well as collegiate athletes, where they're restricting a large amount, and it's really becoming medically compromising for these patients. So I think that's the biggest thing I've seen coming. And when you had mentioned, Danny, like it being underreported, I think kind of what I was referencing is before, when I was talking about my mental health experience, like people don't know what's happening. People around you don't always know what's happening. I feel like for certain people with eating disorder, it's very easy to hide or sneak, what's really going on for them. As far as, just statistically speaking, eating disorders have had the highest mortality rate in all mental health illness. I think now it's just hitting, second highest, with substance abuse illness being the first. With eating disorders, I had listened a while back on one of your podcasts about, I think it was a nutritionist who was on talking about how food and, the brain are so connected. And so when you're experiencing malnutrition, you are, your mood, the way you think, the way you feel is all affected. And so there's also an increase of suicidality, and it's very serious. We see a lot of increase in depression and anxiety with eating disorders.
Yeah, that's one thing I've recently learned. It's the title was Nutritional Therapists. So they do therapy through food. When you're pretty much when you're starving yourself, you're starving your brain of vital nutrients for it to operate properly. And
Yeah.
essentially everything that you eat has a direct effect on your brain. And there's more serotonin produced in your gut than there is in your brain. So,
Mhm.
there's always, they talk about this, I might mess it up again, but it's the vagus nerve that connects your gut to your brain. So
Mhm.
essentially, mental health pretty much can start from your gut and from the food you eat. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of issues that can be solved in regards to mental health and mental illness, so to speak, that can easily be solved just by changing some dietary things in your life and some habits that can make an impact. But it's such an like, I guess, valued or looked at thing that they think, oh, it's mental health. I got to sit and meditate or talk to a therapist. Well, no, there's other things in your life that are just patterns and behaviors that are greatly affecting and negatively that can be changed just by switching up your diet or actually just feeding yourself and properly, hydrating and eating the right thing. So that's why I think eating disorders are such like you said, underlooked thing that plays such a huge role. In fact, you said it's second now, and mortality rate it's a crazy statistic. Just to know that it's not really talked about by anybody, but it's such a fatal thing to deal with.
Yeah, for sure. We, come at it from the sense, we as in our clinic, food is medicine. Food is that first line of defense. It's going to feed your brain and feed your body and fuel you for the day, um, and really give you what you need to function. It affects the whole body, and the medical complications of it are really serious, especially for athletes. Um, the heart is the biggest muscle, and athletes need need that muscle,
Mhm.
um, to be physical. So
Yeah.
it really puts you at risk for something really dangerous happening.
Mhm. So what are some of the physical effects that come from eating disorders, whether regular person or, obviously this is a platform for athletes' mental health, but it affects everybody. We're all human. So I guess you can say some things that it can affect athletes as far as performance goes, and then just as just regular human beings, kind of those things that can be affected.
Yeah. So, for females, especially, one of the biggest things is loss of their menstrual cycle. So, if they're experiencing extreme malnutrition, typically with what we see with anorexia and ARFID and bulimia, is loss of their menses. We really call that the fifth vital sign. So, if that's happening, you need to get a doctor's appointment. Because that can really tell us a lot about if you're getting adequate nutrients. Um, and that's a common symptom for a lot of females. Um, but like I said, it can affect you really from head to toe here, from hair loss to your cardiovascular system to your endocrine system, um, hormones, dehydration, all of those electrolytes imbalances.
Mhm.
Um, it's scary.
Yeah, no, definitely. As far as one thing we haven't talked about yet is body dysmorphia.
Mm,
If we can kind of talk about that and, body image, I think that's such a prevalent issue that we're seeing. I
yeah.
think it's always been, obviously, but I think it's heightened up now with, I'd say, social media and everyone putting their best selves and a lot of edited photos. So I think that's
Mm,
definitely been a major issue that we're seeing in our society these days. So if you can kind of talk about that and, um, yeah.
yeah. So to kind of connect it back to that point with the pandemic, a lot of social media use spiked, with everyone being home, not being able to get out. And so what are they doing? They're online, they're on social media, looking at Instagram, TikTok. And, all those platforms are great. And at the same time, what are you doing? You're comparing yourself to what you see.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that was a huge factor. And starting young, start like kids in fifth grade, fourth grade, are experiencing poor body image. And that just follows you um, through life when that starts. So, um, Yeah, body dysmorphia is a really key component, especially with athletes um, who want a certain body type, who want to look like they play their sport, or they want to, look like a runner or look like a football player. What those stereotypical players are. Um, and so it becomes almost like, have you ever been to like a carnival or a fair and you see like those funhouse
Yep,
mirrors
of
and they
course,
make you
yes.
look so crazy?
Yeah.
That's what people see when they look in the mirror, when they're
Mm.
experiencing body dysmorphia. They become so, channeled in on different parts of themselves and are so critical. And it can really attribute to the disordered eating part as well.
Mhm.
Um, I will say, I feel like males are, I would say it's more underreported in males than females. Um, just in my experience, I've worked with baseball players, like I said, football players, who want a certain look, who feel like they don't have enough muscle, and it becomes really distressing for them. It brings them down.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see it in males that it's underreported. Um, I don't think anyone. I mean, I think typically men don't feel like talking about their feelings and when they're struggling with mental health. So I feel like when it comes to their body, they kind of definitely see that as an issue that they shouldn't be dealing with, but low key they do. So
Yeah.
definitely agree with that. And if you feel comfortable talking about this, I have a quick question that just came to my head. Um, it's kind of like with our society that we're in right now, as far as like there's kind of this clash of fitness junkies and fitness enthusiasts who are constantly in the gym and um, trying to look like a Greek god or goddess, right? But then you have the other spectrum of it where it's like the anti-fat shaming and understanding that like this is my body and just kind of taking the complete opposite approach where it's like, well, I'm just gonna own however body type I have and not take care of myself at all to a degree. And I
Mhm.
kind of was curious what your thoughts on that, because I think that that's also very detrimental and not healthy, because I mean, I personally, I don't care. Like, it's your life. You do whatever you want. It doesn't affect me at the end of the day. But I feel like we come to a point where it's like you're either super ripped or you just like don't care at all. And it's just like, where's the balance in it? Like, where's your balance? And I feel like it's not healthy to be at a point where you're telling people like, oh, just own your body and not care. Like, who cares? Like, don't call me fat or whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, like, if I have a family member who's severely out of shape and they're extremely overweight, I feel like I'd say something. You're gonna, just for my sake, because I want them around. What are
Mhm.
your kind of thoughts on that sort of thing, and how um, there's kind of like that clap back of, I don't care, I'm not going to work out, I'm going to eat whatever I want, and because that's also a problem too, wouldn't you say?
So you just opened a can of worms
I
here,
know I did,
Danny.
but you know what? I'm here. That's, I guess
No,
it's, I if you don't mind talking about it, obviously, but I feel like that's, if we're gonna
yeah.
end the stigma on mental health, I feel like might as well ask the hard questions, right?
Yeah, let's unpack some of it. So, in the work that I do, um, we very much use a health at every size approach.
Mm-hmm.
We meet our patients where they're at and working on some of that self-acceptance if they're in a larger body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess so twofold again. You're talking about kind of people who are hyper focused on working out and eating and kind of being a fitspiration.
Yeah,
Um,
which I mean, that's fine. Like I mean, whatever. Like, and I don't think that. I think that people who are in larger bodies like own that. Like, yeah, be completely accepting of your
yeah,
body. But there's so opposite ends of the spectrum of it, and like the fit kind of Greek god and goddess has always been like kind of in, like everyone wants to look that way, but now there's like this complete other side where it's like I'm so large and like this is my body, I'm gonna own it. And that's, I think, super unhealthy too. And I don't think everyone needs to look like they're completely chiseled and sculpted but
Yeah.
at the same time, also take care of yourself as well is what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, there are some negative health effects. That's kind of the question I was asking. So,
Yeah, I think one term that really comes to mind is diet culture. Um, so there's so much out there in our society that really promotes thinness
hmm
and an appearance ideal,
hmm
meaning you should look like, what's in those magazines
yep,
or what's on your social media. And it really affects people who don't fit that mold,
hmm
who are in those larger bodies and have different body shapes and sizes. um, I think partly um, all bodies are normal, and so I think we put as a society, such a negative emphasis on that larger bodies are bad.
hmm
Um, and when you come at it from like that medical model of fat shaming or, being quote morbidly obese, based on BMI, which we won't even get into that because that's ancient, is really not an effective way to provide effective health care.
hmm
So just by looking at someone, you cannot tell if they are healthy or unhealthy. And I think that's where the health at every size movement is so important, that we're not providing healthcare based on people are um, who are in larger bodies.
hmm
Um, so that's a really key piece. And I think it's about our language and how we talk to people
yep,
that really matters. Like, let's break that, stigma that being fat is bad. Because, like I said, what you, that kind of comparison thing where, like, if you and I both ate the same thing in a day, then we're both not going to look the same
hmm
in a few
of
months.
course,
Like, it's literally what our own individual selves need. Um, and so I think in part, when we think about eating disorders and how food can play a role in that, it's what we call intuitive eating. And really, again, listening to your feedback from your body and listening to like what feels good in your body. And what tastes good, what are your cravings, what did you culturally, like, you're probably going to eat something different than I would eat.
hmm
But there's room for that. Getting rid of those labels of unhealthy versus healthy foods, good and bad foods. I'm rambling here, but
no, this is all great stuff. So keep going.
I think that, those are just like the biggest components of really honoring what you need individually,
hmm
because it isn't a one size fits all world here.
Yep.
All bodies are diverse. They are meant to be diverse. I think the best, if you have it, maybe you can link this in the notes or something, but there's a poodle science video with health at every size, and it's a great metaphor for people to watch. It's a 2-minute video, and it talks about dogs. Like, dogs are all different shapes and sizes,
hmm
and yet we don't, put down those larger, bigger dogs because they don't look like those little tiny dogs that are so cute and cuddly. We appreciate them all for what they are.
Yep.
Um, and I love that metaphor because, I mean, it's true. It's the same with humans. We're not all meant to be the same.
Yeah. No, I do agree. I totally agree about like the whole magazine thing where it's like not everyone's gonna look like that. Not everyone should look like that. And I do agree that we should embrace everybody for who they are and how they are. I wholeheartedly agree. And I was curious because I don't know. Like I don't know like if there are any negative medical effects towards what I was asking. I'm
Yeah.
kind of asking what I've been told my whole life, where it's like if you're larger or at a certain weight for a certain height, like you're in a bad spot and you're gonna get predisposed to all these medical conditions. And I was kind of asking because like, maybe I'm ignorant or whatever, but I don't know. I'm kind of blind in it, so
Yeah, I
I
think
just grew up to think one way, and that's it. I mean, I respect everybody, obviously, but I'm just saying, like, as an athlete, you're just like be in the best shape, and you look in the mirror. If you look like you're in great shape, maybe you could be a little bit better. So I'm always just kind of having that mindset. That's why I was asking.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you're asking those questions. And I think, doing this podcast is a great way to kind of just put new information out there. There is for lack of better words, a traditional mentality um, around, for like how athletes should look or, being or what's going to look good with clothes on or all just different things. And so I think to answer back to like your original question of um, like my thoughts on those extremes, I think what's the takeaway here is really approaching those issues with an individual care plan or like an individual treatment plan. Just connecting it again to my work as I work with PCPs. And I've worked with people who are in larger bodies that have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And so it's really coordinating that treatment with the physician to best meet the person's needs. Just because a doctor says this is what you need to do doesn't mean that's always going to fit what that person's lifestyle is. Is that right? I don't know. You kind of think of it as another metaphor here is, we all grow up maybe knowing that cliche, but lawyers or doctors are going to make the most money. But yet, if we know that's not like our passion and what's going to work for us, like we're not going to go do that. We're going to go do something that works for our lifestyles and, how we operate as people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no,
it's a different way to think.
No, that's awesome. I'm happy you talked about that and went down that rabbit hole and kind of gave those metaphors. And just for anyone out there listening, I'm so sorry if I offended you. That wasn't my plan. I hope I don't get canceled or whatever, but I'm just trying to like clear the air because I'm trying to learn too as I do this. And I think it's important to talk about these sensitive subjects in a constructive manner where we can have a conversation and, have conversations with educated professionals in the field. And so like I said, I'm sorry if I offended anybody. It wasn't the plan or wasn't me.
But I think
what I'm trying to do, but I'm just
no, Danny, I think I think asking that is so important and just really kind of asking whoever's listening, like asking yourselves those questions of like, what are my views on body image? What are my views on nutrition? How does that affect my life? And how does that make me feel?
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree. And then one final point here that you mentioned earlier, or just before we, spoke here on this podcast, is that just the importance of eating disorders and how it can affect your sport and take you out of the game, which is ultimately what we all love and do. Just kind of stressing that point. I know you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, this is definitely a key takeaway. Thinking about how important our sports can be to athletes, whether it's an outlet, whether, you're a paid professional, whether it's just something you enjoy doing. The dangers of eating disorders can be so extreme where, the doctor doesn't feel like you're cleared to play. And so it really ends up being I don't know, it kind of gets in your own way of, for me doing, this thing I want to do most and then being told like, oh, I can't, go to this meet or this practice. And they said, I can't until I'm healthy. Or until, my body's operating how it should, I'm out. So I think that's just another example of like the dangers of eating disorders. Again, coming from that like malnutrition aspect, it's really serious. So I think I just want to really stress that. If anything is, go schedule a doctor's appointment, because of course safety is the priority here. We want athletes to play safe and perform safely.
Yeah, that's awesome. You said that. It's something a lot of people have mentioned here as well, is that just speak up before it gets to the point where it's out of hand and you're out of the game ultimately. Because at the end of the day, we all care so much about the sports we play, like you said, and it does no good if you're on the sidelines because you didn't, speak up earlier and get yourself checked out. So there's no sense in hiding. It's only going to make it worse. So I'm happy that you reiterated that. And we don't want to take up too much of your time here. I appreciate you coming on and talking. If there was one last thing that, like a statement that you'd like to say, or something that you would have wanted to know, or something that you wish, or you want people to know out there who are struggling with eating disorders, or anything of that nature, what is it? And yeah, just kind of that final piece of advice or last statement.
I think what I would say as like the final takeaway would just be mental health matters. I know that's a little cliche here, but I think, before it's too late, you just got to be able to be honest with yourselves and those people around you. And it's not a sign of weakness. And it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, perfect. Love it. Thank you so much.
Uh,
Really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk. And there's a lot of great information here, and I'm excited to put this out there for everyone to hear. So thank you again. Really appreciate it.
of course, Danny. Thank you.